Abel stood silently at the edge of the battlefield, his amber eyes reflecting the dying light of the setting sun. The world, once tormented by the darkness of the demon Lord of the Dusk, was now at peace. The air, which had once crackled with the energy of countless battles, felt strangely still. He should have felt victorious. Yet an unshakable feeling gnawed at him. Abel, I'm sorry to tell you this, but can you leave the team? Roy's voice broke the silence, gentle but firm. Abel turned to face him, his expression unreadable. Roy, who had fought alongside him through countless battles, now struggled to meet his gaze. As the Calamity Demon, the demon Lord of the Dusk is no more, Roy continued, his voice strained. And we're more than enough to defeat the rest of the demons. Therefore, I don't think a grand magician like you is needed in the front line anymore. Abel's silence stretched on, his amber eyes, the color of molten gold, locked onto Roy. He knew what was coming, yet hearing it aloud stung more than he expected. Roy averted his gaze as he spoke the next words, almost as if they were a betrayal. There is no need for your amber eyes in this world, now that it's at peace. Abel's hand clenched at his side. The truth that both of them had been avoiding was now laid bare. His amber eyes, the very symbol of his power, had become a curse. They were the same as the eyes of the demons they had fought for so long. More than 90% of the demons they had slain shared his golden gaze. To the people, the eyes that once symbolized salvation had become a reminder of the enemy they had just vanquished. Roy's voice softened as he struggled with his words. I'm sure that you also realized, didn't you? Magicians like you, with amber eyes, will face persecution now that peace has returned. Abel remained quiet, the weight of the truth bearing down on him. He had known this moment was coming, but had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that it wouldn't happen so soon. The same people who had once looked to him for salvation would now turn on him, driven by fear and prejudice. I've already prepared a mansion for you, Roy added hurriedly, as if trying to offer some solace. So you can rest assured, Abel, I won't appear in front of you guys ever again. Abel stood unmoving, his mind turning inward. It wasn't Roy's fault. He knew that. He even understood the reasoning behind it. Yet, the bitterness lingered. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. Roy's voice was filled with regret, but the damage was done. The following days blurred together, each one harder than the last. Abel found himself withdrawing more and more, his once lively spirit dulled. His body felt heavy, sluggish, as if the very world was rejecting him. He had given everything, his power, his life, and now he had nothing left. He slept, and for what seemed like an eternity, he dreamed of nothing. When Abel finally awoke, it was to the sound of cracking stone. The lid of his coffin, worn by time, had broken. He pushed it aside, rising from the tomb that had held him for what felt like a lifetime. My body hurts, he murmured, rubbing his eyes. I must have slept too long. As he adjusted to the dim light, a realization dawned on him. If it went well, then this should be the world 200 years into the future. He chuckled softly to himself. I have succeeded. I've completed the spell, a reincarnation spell that no one other than me could create. If this is a world where civilization has matured and knowledge has increased, where things that were once impossible, even with magic, have become possible, Abel whispered to himself, a glimmer of hope sparking in his heart. Then this world should have what it takes to accept these amber eyes. He searched the room for a mirror, but found none. There should have been a mirror here, but it's gone. It must have gotten buried. He glanced down at his small hands, the body he had painstakingly crafted for himself. This body was created based on myself as a child. I could have altered my looks, but I still felt attached to my previo. Abel chuckled to himself, brushing his fingers through his hair. I'm sure no one would recognize me anymore, so it doesn't matter. Suddenly, he heard a faint rustle from behind. His eyes narrowed. Judging from the sound, it's a woman, or rather, something posing as a human. Impressive. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Her voice trembled with emotion. Abel, beautiful. I've waited so long for this day. Abel tilted his head, studying her carefully. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What's this now? I'm sorry, but have we met? The woman smiled, her amber eyes gleaming in the low light. I've been waiting for you for so long. Abel frowned, trying to place her face. Hold on, I can't remember anyone so beautiful. The woman took a step closer, her voice softer now. Ever since you saved me 200 years ago, I've wanted to repay you. After 100 years of searching, I finally found you. Abel's eyes widened as the memories began to flood back. Lilith? Her smile grew as she nodded. Yes, Abel-sama. It's me. Long time no see, Lilith. You haven't changed at all, though. Actually, did you get a little younger in these 200 years? Abel asked, his tone lighter, though his heart ached with the weight of their shared past. Lilith laughed, her voice filled with warmth. More than a little, I'd say. I reincarnated, just like you. Abel's eyes sharpened. Your eyes. I remember them being amber, like mine. But now? Lilith removed a small, thin sheet from her eye. I'm wearing color contact lenses, she explained. It hides the true color. Abel's expression softened with understanding. So that half-transparent sheet can change the color of your eyes. Something so simple, yet it was impossible in our time. Lilith nodded. Yes, Abel-sama. The evolution of mankind is amazing, isn't it? So many lives were lost because of our amber eyes. And now, this small invention solves what caused so much pain. Abel looked at her, marveling at the irony. The irony is sharp, isn't it? After all the suffering caused by eye color, something like this could have saved so many. Lilith gently took his hand. I'm sure there's much to talk about, but shall we change places first? I have a house nearby. Abel hesitated for a moment, then nodded, allowing her to guide him. All right, let's go. As they stepped out into the snow-covered landscape, the cold air bit at Abel's skin. He glanced down at his feet, watching his first steps in the snow of a world 200 years later. Welcome to the future, Abel-sama, Lilith said, her voice filled with a quiet joy. Together, they walked into a world that had long forgotten them both, but one in which they would find new purpose. Up ahead, a small cottage nestled quietly among towering mansions, stood in stark contrast to its opulent neighbors. The air felt crisp, carrying a sense of serenity, but Abel couldn't help but feel slightly underwhelmed. We're here, Abel-sama, Lilith announced softly, bringing Abel back from his thoughts. Huh. Abel glanced at the modest house. It looks a little simple, compared to the mansion next to it. His eyes drifted over the grand estate beside Lilith's place. It's intricately designed. Well, I think it's good to be simple, Lilith replied with a gentle smile. For someone in your position, I thought it'd be best to avoid unnecessary attention. Abel nodded, his amber eyes scanning the cottage once more. Well, that's true. In the body of a child, I can't even exert 3/10 of my power from before. So the smart choice is to wait quietly until I start growing. Suddenly, Abel noticed something strange. This light? His gaze fixed on a soft, steady glow emanating from inside the cottage. I didn't feel Lilith using any magic. Lilith chuckled, noticing Abel's confusion. They're called light bulbs, she explained. They're used for lighting nowadays. With just a press of a switch, they illuminate their surroundings. Brilliant, huh? Abel's eyes narrowed thoughtfully as he considered the glowing object. I see. They must have magic stones inside them. And when you press the switch, light magic is automatically produced. Lilith smiled again, this time with amusement. You don't seem very. Abel shrugged. It's indeed a wonderful invention, but still, it's more convenient too. Thinking like that is so like you, Abel-sama. Abel turned to her, raising an eyebrow. What's that ABO? Lilith's expression softened as she elaborated. Using luminescent magic to create light is the simplest and most basic magic anyone can learn. Regardless of eye color, everyone can use this kind of. Then why do people waste so much effort creating such unnecessary equipment? Abel asked, a frown settling on his face. Why does no one wonder about that? Lilith didn't respond immediately, and the silence between them felt heavy, as though there was more she wanted to say. Abel's gaze drifted back to the light bulb, still struggling to fully grasp the world he had returned. He thought to himself, that time, I still didn't fully understand the real meaning behind Lilith's words. How can this be? Magician's level range in this world has decreased so much since then, he murmured under his breath, disbelief coating his words. It's unbelievable. This world has gone through and on. Lil. Abel's frustration only deepened when he glanced at the ancient books Lilith had provided him. Useless rambling information about something even a 10-year-old child would have known 200 years ago. He thought, this part even introduces a wrong magic syntax for its explanations. Have they ever even used that syntax to create magic? He sighed deeply. Books were written by hand and transcribed in many copies 200 years ago, so it's understandable that the content and quality of the books changed and deteriorated after many restorations. But this Lilith, sensing Abel's disappointment, broke the silence. Let's change this, she suggested. While culture has evolved greatly, there are downsides. Spells that were once performed easily are now. Abel looked at her, and then at the light bulb again. As expected, this childlike body can't stay up late, he muttered, feeling exhaustion. Lilith noticed his fatigue. Why did you choose to use a child's body, knowing it would hinder you? She asked softly. Abel paused before replying, his voice thoughtful. It's true that it has many risks, but there are also some advantages. In this world, they say there are 3 peaks that you can reach. Your academic peak in your teens, your physical peak in your 20s, and your magical peak in your 30s. I still have a lot to learn about this world, 200 years into the footu. He gave her a rare, fleeting smile. Moreover, I want to start my new life in a different world, as a child. Lilith returned his smile warmly. Abel-sama, here's some breakfast and lunch I prepared for you, she said, placing the meals on the table. I have to go to work now, but I'll return home in the evening. Please, get some rest and make yourself at home. Abel watched her leave, feeling a sense of gratitude mixed with curiosity. Work, huh? Lilith must have some kind of livelihood. I wonder what kind of job she does in a village full of humans like this. Suddenly, a knock at the door startled him awake. Someone's here. Height couldn't be Lilith. A voice. Abel frowned. Wrong. Lilith's acquaintance? The door creaked open, revealing a boy, likely the son of a wealthy family, judging by his clothes. From what I can tell, he looks like a normal human boy, maybe the son of the owner of the mansion next door. Abel sighed inwardly. Another spoiled brat. There will always be some in this world. The boy continued. Abel's amber eyes flashed with annoyance. Oi, ABRU, Ted said, his voice exaggerated. Become my junior. Abel's patience wore thin. Sorry, but I'm not interested in this master-student relationship. Ted's eyes widened, clearly not used to being turned down. What the heck? Come on, become my junior. Abel sighed, knowing there was no other way to end this. His eyes narrowed dangerously as he fixed his gaze on Ted. Let me give you some advice. You'd better stop trying to get involved with. With a slow, deliberate movement, Abel leaned forward, letting his amber eyes glint in the light. These amber eyes? Understand now. Ted gasped, stepping back. Why you, those eyes? Good, looks like it worked. Abel thought these amber eyes, the same as the demons, symbolized the evil in this world. Now he'll have no desire to connect with me. But instead of the fear Abel expected, Ted burst into laughter. Pee-poo-poo-poo. For real? Really, amber eyes? It's my first time seeing those things. Ha-ha. Abel blinked, stunned. Why is this happening? The boy, unfazed by the menacing eyes, laughed even louder, leaving Abel speechless and confused. First time I've ever seen, Ted exclaimed, eyes wide as he stared at Abel's amber eyes. Amber eyes? Seriously? Abel sighed inwardly, feeling irritation bubble up. Why do things always turn out like this? His thoughts were interrupted by footsteps approaching. Hey Ted, a deep voice called out. What have I told you about randomly coming to Lilith Sand's house? Abel turned to see a stern-looking young man. They must be brothers, regardless of eye color. Base and I-chan, Ted called, waving. Look at this guy. This is the first time I've seen someone with chicken eyes. To think I wasted my time arguing with this brat. Abel's irritation flared. It seems like a joke coming from someone like him. He focused on Base, who seemed to be a few years older than Ted. Despite his disdain, Base would need to be cautious of these amber eyes. I see, Base said, observing Abel. I heard Lilith say her talented little brother would stay here. MHM. He sighed. Guess my expectations were too high. Don't tell me his older brother is like this too. Well, if Lilith says so, Base's voice trailed off dismissively. Chicken eyes. Chicken eyes. Abel clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. His brother also said the same thing. The only thing I know for sure is that these amber eyes are viewed as the symbol of evil. He wondered if that was true. Base's laughter broke his thoughts. Foo-ha-ha-ha. Base and I-chan, this Abebe commoner, doesn't even know. His mocking tone made Abel's frustration simmer. Not good. I don't have a chance to correct my name anymore. Abel thought. Base continued. Listen here, Abebe. That chicken-like eye color doesn't match any of the elements. Not fire, water, or wind. They can't perform magical crafting or healing magic. They're just ordinary eyes. That's enough, Ted. You said too much, Base said, sensing Abel's growing agitation. Ted looked surprised. Well, It's true that unless someone with amber eyes has undergone 10 years of training, all the elements will still be locked. However, if they get through that stage, they'll have the power to control every element. It might be different at the beginning, but soon they'll be able to perform advanced magic in all elements. Abel raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. That might be why people view these eyes as a threat to mankind, or so it said. A BC-san, right? Base said, correcting himself. At least this name sounds a little better. It's Abel, Abel corrected. Abel-san. I apologize for my brother's disrespect. Oh, I don't mind, Abel replied, trying to stay composed. That's okay, it's not a big deal. Ted, you should apologize, Lilith said firmly. No way, Ted protested. It's true he has chicken eyes. Don't be like that, Ted, Lilith scolded. Even without magic, Abel-san can live a peaceful life here. He's also the same age as us. We'll be in your care from now on. I hope you can get along. Abel felt annoyed. Don't tell me he thinks I'm a fool with amber eyes. Just the kind of people I hate. The chosen one does not do ordinary things, he muttered under his breath. Come on, Ted, Bay said, pulling Ted away. Let's go home and study magic. See you later. Ababy chicken eyes, Ted called as they left. Abel watched them go, shaking his head. What's with those two? He thought, bursting into someone's house and talking badly about the owner. He sighed and returned to his book. At least in the past 100 years, there's been no war between humans and demons. No one is afraid of these evil demons' eyes anymore. Abel continued reading, realizing that people with red, blue, green, gray, or black eyes could easily use their elements to create magic. In contrast, those with amber eyes needed much more practice initially. No wonder the levels of magicians are so low. Abel thought bitterly. Amber eyes are considered useless and are targets of contempt. He sighed again, feeling disheartened. I don't like using eye contacts, but I understand why Lilith used them. Being laughed at again. It's not easy to have a normal life. Lilith's cheerful voice interrupted his thoughts. I'm home, she announced, stepping inside. Abel looked up at her maid uniform. That's right, she said, noticing his puzzled expression. In this world, there is a job called housemaid. So, what do you think? Abel managed a weak smile. It suits you. Okay, I'll make dinner now, Lilith said, heading to the kitchen. Hey, wait, Abel called. Yes. I understand why you had to hide your eye color, he said thoughtfully. Oh, I see, Lilith replied, relieved. I thought you just didn't want others to know you were a demon. Abel nodded, recalling the past. After 200 years, demons almost certainly no longer exist. I was the leader of the heroes tasked with defeating the Demon King. When humans triumphed and demons were left in ruins, the power of magicians weakened. He looked at Lilith with a sad smile. In the end, the fear of amber eyes disappeared when there was no need to train to become stronger anymore. Lilith looked at him with sadness and understanding. That's everything, right? Everything you said is correct. Do you hate humans? She asked, her voice trembling. Abel shook his head. No. Do you hate us? Lilith pressed. My team was the one that ended the demons, Abel said quietly. That day, the Demon King and I. He paused, vulnerability in his voice. It's true there were times I felt desperate, but you risked your life to save me. Together, you found me a safe place to live. Abel's gaze softened. Do you remember? Lilith said, her voice filled with emotion. It was only for a few weeks, but you taught me how to use magic and human rules. Abel shook his head. Don't try to change the subject. I remember you told me a lot. Well, every woman has her secrets, Lilith said gently. I wonder what she's gone through. She was so cute and lovely 200 years ago. Abel's eyes showed nostalgia. A woman at the pub taught me that. Abel-sama, Lilith said softly, gratitude in her eyes. I'm always grateful for everything you've done for me. Really? Abel said, touched. Thank you. At that moment, Abel could only use the book to hide from Lilith's gaze, feeling a mix of emotions as he reflected on their past and the uncertain future. Abel found himself in an unusual situation. The hot water felt good, but that was the only thing about the moment that made any sense. He was sitting in a bath with Lilith, something he hadn't exactly planned for. In fact, it had all started with Lilith forcibly inviting him, despite his protests. Master Abel, let's go to the bath area, she had said, almost dragging him along. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that she had half abducted him. I'm sorry, she had admitted later. I just couldn't hold back my love for Master Abel. Abel, although flustered, couldn't help but remark, You seem to have a strange compulsion to abduct someone into the bath when you can't hold back your love. Lilith giggled. Good grief, a man and woman, alone and naked in the bath. Do you know the implications of such a situation? Abel tried to maintain his composure, despite the awkwardness. With all due respect, Lilith, it's rather odd coming from you, especially when you say it to someone who looks like a prepubescent boy. She wasn't wrong. Abel's current form, a child's body, wasn't exactly appealing. He glanced at Lilith, who had grown quite beautifully over the past 200 years. He remembered when she was just a tiny child, barely 5 years old. Now the roles had reversed. Lilith smiled warmly. I'm happy, Master Abel. You've finally become aware of me as a woman. Abel sighed, knowing this conversation was leading somewhere he wasn't prepared for. Lilith, no matter what happens, my principle is never to cower in self-denial. I know, she replied softly. That night, the inevitable happened. Abel, reflecting on the moment, realized that in his previous life, he hadn't been interested in anything other than becoming stronger. Now, he was unsure if what he was experiencing was true happiness, but something about it felt right. As the night ended, Lilith warned him about catching a cold. Abel lay down to sleep, feeling as though he'd be able to rest more soundly than usual. The next few days passed peacefully until Ted, Lilith's younger brother, came barging in again, like clockwork. Abel sighed, knowing that Ted just wanted a playmate, but Abel had no intention of playing. As Ted began using magic clumsily, Abel couldn't help but notice his sloppy technique. You're doing it all wrong, Abel thought, watching Ted struggle to use his strengthening magic. Despite the child's efforts, it was clear he needed a lot more training. Ted, of course, didn't give up. I'll beat you this time, chicken, he declared, charging at Abel. Abel, far more experienced despite his childlike appearance, easily dodged and subdued him. But instead of mocking him, Abel smiled. Don't worry, Ted. With about 20 more years of serious practice, you'll get it right. Ted wasn't thrilled with the idea of waiting that long. You're supposed to be my underling. How dare you, he shouted, his frustration palpable. Abel chuckled. All right, Ted, I'll be your underling, if you can take this muffler away from me by sundown. Ted's eyes lit up. Victory is mine. And so, the chase began, with Ted determined to claim victory, and Abel ready to see just how much potential the young magician truly had. Abel dashed through the forest, with Ted relentlessly chasing behind him. Despite Ted's determination, Abel couldn't help but notice how ineffective his body-strengthening magic was. Ted had barely used any magic in his pursuit, which wasn't surprising. While Ted had stamina, his magical talent and intelligence were lacking. How can you be so calm? Ted huffed, clearly struggling to keep up. Abel smirked. It's because my training method is different from that of an ordinary kid. Even 200 years ago, no one could keep up with me when I was serious. At best, someone like the hero of wind, Roy, might stand a chance. But you still have time before sundown to give up. Ted wasn't about to give in. I got you now. No more running. Abel easily sidestepped Ted's attack, thinking to himself, he's lasted longer than I expected. I thought he'd give up after 5 minutes, but it's been 20. He must have been doing some basic fitness training. With the chase over, Abel decided it was time to head back. But as they approached, Abel overheard a heated conversation between Lilith and Base. It seemed Base had developed feelings for Lilith and wasn't taking rejection well. Why won't you accept me? Base demanded. Lilith's response was firm. I already have someone else in my heart. I'm sorry, but I cannot have a relationship with you. Base, furious, spat back. Are you in love with your own brother? That's disgusting. Abel sighed to himself. Although I'm not really Lilith's brother, it's easier to let people believe that. He shook his head, feeling a little sorry for Base, and decided to pretend he hadn't seen anything. Meanwhile, Ted hadn't given up. I'll get you this time, he shouted, charging at Abel. But once again, Abel easily avoided his attack. How did you dodge that? Ted asked, frustrated. Maybe you should start by learning how to erase your presence before attacking. Abel replied calmly. Ted, exhausted and out of magic, had reached his limit. Abel thought to himself, it may have been too much for his first day. Hopefully, he learns from this and doesn't come back tomorrow. But a few days later, Ted was back, more determined than ever. Abel, you're wide open, Ted called out, launching another attack. You should stop announcing your moves, Abel chuckled as he effortlessly avoided Ted's strikes. Ted, persistent as always, shouted, I'll take that muffler today. Abel grinned, noticing that while Ted was still far from mastering body-strengthening magic, he had improved a little. He's a simple person, but this kind of magic is a good match for him, Abel thought. Still, Ted's attacks were far too slow, and Abel continued to evade with ease. Suddenly, Ted tripped and fell hard on the pavement. Abel rushed over to find that Ted had broken his leg. It's okay, Abel said softly. I'm not great at recovery magic, but I can handle this much. Using recovery magic, Abel began healing Ted's leg, but his technique wasn't perfect. What are you doing? Someone called out, noticing Abel's unconventional healing method. Have you never seen recovery magic before? Just stay quiet and let me concentrate. Abel snapped, focusing on the delicate process of repairing Ted's bones. While his approach was rough, it worked, and Ted's leg slowly mended. Once Ted was stable, Abel helped him up, but another bystander, a nobleman, wasn't happy with what he saw. How dare you treat Master Ted like that? You're just a commoner, and Ted is a noble. You've sullied the honor of the nobles. Abel, unfazed, replied, It doesn't matter right now. We need to get Ted to a safer place. But the nobleman wasn't satisfied. It does matter, you peasant. I challenge you to a duel. Abel sighed. It seems some lessons are harder to learn than others. Abel stood firm, facing his noble challenger, who seethed with rage. Let's duel, the noble spat, his voice trembling with anger. Abel sighed, realizing things had gotten more complicated than expected. Wait a minute, he said calmly. I don't have any reason to fight you, though. Don't screw around, the noble shouted, his face reddening. You've made a fool out of a noble. His fury only seemed to increase with each passing second. Seems I've made him even angrier, Abel thought, glancing at Ted, who still needed medical attention. Should I accept the duel and finish this quickly? He mulled over the options, then nodded. Understood. I'll accept the duel. The noble smirked, clearly believing he had the upper hand. Abel, however, was more interested in studying his opponent's magic. I've always wanted to see the types of magic nobles use in this era, Abel said to himself. If I finish this battle quickly, without using too much flashy magic, no one will pay much attention to me. The noble, now eager to start, declared, Whoever forces their opponent to say I give up first will be the winner. And since I'm older than you, I'll give you a Han. Got it, Abel interrupted, not wanting to waste any more time. Let's finish this quickly. No handicap needed. The noble's face twisted with fury. How dare you insult me, he shouted, his voice shaking with indignation. You'll regret this for the rest of your life. With a dramatic flourish, he conjured a wind effigy, moving with incredible speed. Abel observed him calmly. The power is mediocre, but his conjuration speed is fast. Must be that sword he's holding. He narrowed his eyes, realizing, this is probably my first time seeing a regalia. Surprised, are you? The noble sneered. This sword is a regalia, a magical artifact that makes me overwhelmingly fast when conjuring my magic. I see, Abel thought. Regalia? No wonder the level of magicians has fallen. This kind of magic tool allows people to bypass the need to build their own magical source. It's convenient, but it's made modern magicians lazy. As the noble conjured another spell, Abel remained unimpressed. Was that supposed to be magic? I thought it was a flying balloon, he teased, pushing the noble's buttons further. How dare you? The noble roared. Abel, growing tired of the fight, decided to demonstrate real magic. As a token of gratitude for your cooperation in my investigation, let me show you what true magic is. He cast his own version of the wind effigy, but with much more power, though he toned it down to avoid serious injury. The noble's confidence shattered as he struggled to keep up. Do you feel like giving up yet? Abel asked casually. The noble, now sweating and panting, stared at Abel in disbelief. A kid with inferior eyes, no fair. Who are you really? Just then Lilith appeared. Master Abel, she called out. What are you doing? Abel smirked. Just taking care of some trash that was lying around. The noble, still reeling from the fight, looked at Lilith and sneered. You're just a housemaid. Wouldn't this be problematic for you? Lilith's eyes narrowed. Shut up. I won't forgive you if you insult Master Abel again. The noble, too stunned to reply, stayed silent. Abel chuckled softly. It's all good. Forgive Lilith. His remarks are nothing compared to what I've heard in the past. The noble's face showed confusion. Why am I, a noble, being forgiven by him? He thought, but wisely kept his mouth shut, sensing that any further protest would provoke Lilith's wrath. An hour later, Ted's leg had been treated, but the healer gave him strict instructions. It'll take about 6 months to fully heal. Please be patient. Ted, frustrated, muttered, 6 months? That's way too long. Abel stood nearby, watching Ted. I can't wait 6 months for you to recover. You're my daily sparring partner, he thought. With a determined look, he began using his own healing magic. Recovery magic, body-strengthening magic. Let's change the application. He worked quietly, mending Ted's injury much faster than the healer had anticipated. Good, Abel whispered to himself. This should be enough. Ted, still unaware of Abel's efforts, had fallen asleep, his face peaceful. Abel looked at him with a mix of affection and impatience. Sorry, Ted, but I need you to heal faster. I'm short on time, and I need you back in training. The next morning, after the chaos of the duel, Bass and his father, Evans, came to apologize to Abel. Master Abel, I'm very sorry for what happened. Please forgive my foolish son, Evans said earnestly, bowing his head low in shame. Bass, however, stood with his arms crossed, seething with resentment. Why do I have to apologize to a commoner with inferior eyes? Bass muttered under his breath, barely concealing his contempt. Evans shot his son a sharp look. What are you saying? Bass, let me make this clear. We are not hiring Miss Lilith. Miss Lilith is hiring us. What? Bass was taken aback, struggling to process this revelation. Abel, watching the exchange with quiet amusement, thought to himself, I see. So that's why a high-class demon like Lilith serves humans. She must have something on this noble family. Evans continued, oblivious to his son's inner turmoil. Master Abel is too generous. Please don't punish us too severely. Abel waved them off. You can raise your head. I'm not angry in the first place. Later that night, a different conversation took place in the Evans household. Bass approached his father with a defiant expression. Father, will you get rid of Abel and Miss Lilith from this territory? No, Evans replied firmly, sensing the hostility in his son's tone. Why not? They're just imbeciles. We can rule over this territory without them. Evans sighed, disappointed. I've told you before, this village has many geographical disadvantages. It only prospers thanks to Miss Lilith's advice. She's our benefactor, and I will never ignore her opinions. Bass's face twisted in frustration. Father, you're wrong. We don't need her. We can be strong on our own. Suddenly, a voice interrupted them. What's going on here? Ted, Bass's younger brother, appeared in the doorway. I could hear you too from down the hall. Ted, you're walking, Evans exclaimed, shocked. The doctor said it would take 6 months for your injury to heal. Ted grinned proudly. Not only can I walk, but I can run and play just fine. Bass turned to his father, still fuming. Father, why do we have to bow our heads to Miss Lilith? Who or what exactly is she? Evans hesitated, knowing the truth, but unwilling to reveal everything just yet. I can't tell you right now, but someday you'll understand. Bass wasn't satisfied. Fine then. Father, will you recommend me to the Arsulia Magic Academy? Evans paused for a moment before responding. The Arsulia Magic Academy, a prestigious institution that has trained many elite magicians. It takes at least 5 years to graduate. Bass nodded eagerly. I want to learn stronger, more powerful magic. I will become the strongest magician, one whom no one can defeat. Evans sighed, seeing the ambition in his son's eyes. You're to remain here and study as the Lord's heir. That's what we agreed. But Bass was insistent. Father, please. I need to be stronger. I want to cut down my enemies, noble and commoner alike. Ted, standing in the background, remained calm despite his brother's outburst. You don't need to be like that, Base, he said quietly. Base whipped around, his face contorted with rage. Shut up. You're the shame of this family. It's all because of you that we've fallen so low. Evans, realizing that Base was not in a state to listen, relented. Fine. I'll recommend you to the Arsulia Magic Academy. I hope that by gaining experience outside of this country, you'll see the world as it really is. Base smirked, satisfied with his father's answer. Thank you, father. I knew you would come around. As Base left the room, Evans turned to Ted. Where did I go wrong with that boy? Ted smiled, his usual playful self. I'm sure Base will be fine, father. Later, as they sat alone, Evans revealed something to Ted that he had kept hidden for years. Ted, there's something I need to tell you. A long time ago, when I was hunting in the forest, I was attacked by a demon. Miss Lilith saved my life. She's been helping us ever since. Ted listened carefully, absorbing the weight of his father's words. Evans continued, Miss Lilith has been more than just a neighbor. She's been a teacher to me, guiding this village through difficult times. That's why I respect her so much. Ted, always the optimistic one, nodded. You don't have to worry, father. Abel's my friend. I'll always get along with him and Lilith. Evans smiled at his youngest son. Thank you, Ted. I'm counting on you to keep the peace in this village. The next day, Ted burst into Abel's room with his usual enthusiasm. I'm here, ready for today's training teach. Abel looked up from his book, annoyed but not surprised. How many times have I told you to knock quietly when I'm reading? Ted ignored his protest, grinning ear to ear. Come on, teach. Show me that magic from yesterday. I think I've finally got the hang of it. Abel sighed but couldn't help but smile. Fine. Let's see what you've learned. You can use the body-strengthening magic I taught you. Ted nodded, full of energy. Leave it to me, teach. I'll beat you for sure today. Abel chuckled. We'll see about that. As they headed outside to train, Abel reflected on how much Ted had grown since the incident. Despite everything, the young boy had proven to be more mentally mature than his older brother, Base. And in the end, Abel realized that perhaps Ted was the key to ensuring a brighter future for their village, one that would balance strength with wisdom. 2 years had passed since I awakened from my deep slumber, thanks to the effects of reincarnation magic. Now I was on my way to the royal capital, riding in a carriage for what felt like half a day. Ted, my young companion, eagerly exclaimed, Teach, we're almost there, as if the destination couldn't come sooner. I looked out the window and sighed, oh yeah, where are we going again? Ted's excitement was infectious, but my mood remained somber. We're heading to the Arsulia Magic Academy for your entrance exam, remember? Ted reminded me with a grin. As the carriage rattled along, my thoughts wandered. 2 years of studying magic and understanding the modern world, yet I still found myself feeling blue at the thought of returning to school, of all things. What do you want to do in the future, Master Abel? Ted suddenly asked. I blinked at him. Probably just like before, I'll travel around the country as an adventurer. Ted tilted his head. Adventurer? They abolished all adventure jobs 10 years ago. The number of monsters has decreased so much that there's no need for them anymore. Oh, I murmured, surprised by this revelation. My knowledge of the world was outdated. Most of the books I had read were from long ago, and I had no idea how much had changed. If you want a career in magic these days, you have to go to a magic academy. Without a degree, you're not even qualified to talk about it, Ted explained. 200 years ago, I was called an unparalleled genius, and now I have to attend school like a commoner? I muttered, half to myself. Perhaps you just want to mooch off me, Master Abel? Ted teased. I chuckled. No, I can't rely on Lilith forever. Besides, I need to broaden my horizons. I had spent the last 2 years observing the decline in the quality of magicians. It was abnormal. At first, I thought the magical regalia, tools that simplified complex spells, were to blame, but there was more to it. Still, I couldn't deny their usefulness. The heating pot Lilith used was convenient. Ted interrupted my thoughts again. Thanks to you, my magic has improved a lot. I'll do my best from here on out. His enthusiasm was endearing. He had grown a lot since we first met. Back then, he was an immature brat, but his manners had improved, and so had his magical talent, even if teaching him was often challenging. Suddenly, Ted exclaimed, "We're here! Arcelia Magic Academy." The carriage stopped in front of the prestigious institution. The academy was as grand as I had imagined, known for producing elite magicians for centuries. However, as we stepped out of the carriage, a group of students immediately confronted us. "Hey, you the one with no family crest on your clothes. Are you one of those rumored inferior eyes?" One of them sneered. "You should be working on a farm somewhere, not here." I ignored their taunts, but Ted clenched his fists, his face red with anger. "You can't judge someone by the color of their eyes," he shouted, defending me. I never expected him to raise his voice for my sake. Discrimination against amber-eyed magicians like me had persisted through the ages, even here at the kingdom's most elite academy. Before I could say anything, a voice cut through the tension. "You two nobles, shame on you." A young woman with fiery red eyes and a family crest on her ribbon approached, spreading malicious gossip about a commoner who just arrived. "You're an absolute disgrace to the nobles." Her words silenced the bullies, who quickly backed down. Ted whispered, "Teach, let's help her." But I shook my head. "No, it's unnecessary. Her strength is obvious." The girl introduced herself as Eliza. "My name is Eliza. After graduating from Arcelia Magic Academy, I shall become a great female magician who will make history." Her confidence was palpable. The bullies, trying to regain their composure, sneered. "You better watch your tone, girl." One of them spat. Eliza's eyes flashed dangerously. "Get out of my sight right now." The force in her voice made them scramble away in fear. I approached Eliza and said, "I didn't ask for help, but I'd still like to thank you." She smirked at me. "Don't get the wrong idea. I don't like spineless, whiny babies, that's all." Her words were harsh, but there was a strange warmth to them. "If you want me to notice you, be more disciplined than anyone else. I'm only interested in strong men." As she walked away, Ted grumbled, "What the heck is wrong with that girl?" I smiled to myself. Who knows? But there's something about her. I feel like we've met somewhere before. With the academy looming before us and the challenges that awaited, I couldn't help but feel that this new chapter in my life was about to become more interesting than I had ever anticipated. Abel stood at the entrance of the prestigious Arcelia Magic Academy, ready to face the infamous entrance examination. This exam was known for being challenging, consisting of two parts, a written test and a skill test. Both sections had a maximum score of 100 points, making the total possible score 200. For most students, this would be a nerve-wracking challenge, but for Abel, it was merely a formality. As the first part of the exam began, Abel glanced at the paper in front of him. The written test was a mix of reading comprehension, simple mathematics, and writing. He couldn't help but smile to himself. "This is far too easy," he thought. Abel worked through the questions effortlessly. With the declining magical standards of the current era, even the most difficult exams had been reduced to a level where students with basic abilities could pass. For someone like Abel, who had lived for centuries and mastered countless magical disciplines, achieving a perfect score seemed inevitable. However, when he reached question 12, something caught his attention. "Prove that magic cannot create a human soul using Deeperonix's final theorem," the question read. Abel paused, an amused smile playing on his lips. This was clearly designed to trip up the brightest students, a question crafted to prevent anyone from earning a perfect score. He could almost picture the smug expression of the examiner who had included it. But what they didn't know was that Abel himself had written Deeperonix's final theorem more than 200 years ago when he was just a child. Back then, magic research had been obsessed with the concept of creating a human soul through spells. The human body modification trend was at its peak, with many magicians conducting dangerous experiments in an attempt to achieve this impossible feat. The obsession had claimed countless lives, and it became a major societal issue. Even as a young boy, Abel had realized the futility of trying to create a soul through magic. He had published Deeperonix's final theorem anonymously to put an end to the senseless research. The theorem proved conclusively that magic could not generate a living soul. Abel had no intention of taking credit for his work, so he signed the theorem with the name Deeperonix after a dog owned by an elderly couple in his neighborhood. Now, as Abel read the exam question, he couldn't help but chuckle to himself. I should have done a better job back then, he thought. The theorem he had written as a child was incomplete, and in retrospect, rather crude. Should I correct it here and now? He mused, but quickly dismissed the thought. He had no intention of revising ancient work for the sake of an entrance exam. Abel completed the rest of the written test with ease, confident in his near-perfect performance. As the examiners gathered the papers, they announced that the second part of the exam would begin shortly, the skill test. This was the portion of the exam where students would demonstrate their magical abilities in a practical setting. The skill testing ground was vast, an open field designed to test ranged magic. Abel and the other students were led to a large setup with multiple targets at varying distances. The examiners explained that the students would need to select a regalia, a magical tool that amplified one's abilities, and use it to strike the targets. Each regalia corresponded to a student's eye color, allowing the examiners to measure both the power and control of their magic. As Abel approached the regalia table, he quickly noticed something. There was no regalia for amber-colored eyes like his. As I thought, he muttered under his breath. They didn't prepare one for amber eyes. This wasn't surprising to Abel. Amber eyes had long been associated with weak or non-existent magical abilities, a misconception that had persisted for centuries. Abel had lived long enough to see this myth perpetuated across generations. One of Abel's students, Ted, eagerly approached him. "Teacher, you'll be using the red regalia too, right?" Ted asked excitedly. Abel smiled and nodded, picking up the red regalia. It didn't matter to him which one he used. His mastery over magic was far beyond the limitations of such tools. The examiner began explaining the test in detail. You will need to shoot magic at the target using the regalia. The setup is made of sturdy materials, so do not hesitate to use your full power. The regalia you are using matches the magic source already set in advance, allowing us to measure both the innate magical ability and the skill to release it efficiently. Let's begin. Ted was the first to step forward. He was excited, almost overly so, and Abel watched him with concern. Though Ted had potential, his level as a magician was still developing. Using an unfamiliar regalia could lead to complications. Sure enough, Ted's fireball fizzled out before even reaching the target. The crowd murmured in disappointment, and Abel sighed inwardly. As expected, he thought, Ted's inexperience with the regalia had caused his magic to falter. Next up was Base, a student from a noble family. He confidently strode forward and cast a powerful spell, causing the crowd to gasp in admiration. "What a monster," they whispered. Abel watched silently, unimpressed. Base's magic was decent, but it was nothing compared to what Abel could do. Finally, it was Abel's turn. The examiner called his number. Exam number 27, Abel, please step forward. Abel approached the center of the field, and the crowd fell silent. He could hear them whispering. Can he really use magic? Amber eyes? I've never seen anyone with amber eyes succeed in magic. The examiner, too, seemed skeptical. Can someone with amber eyes perform magic at this level? He muttered under his breath, unsure of what to expect. Abel, however, remained calm. He had lived long enough to grow accustomed to such doubts. Without hesitation, Abel began preparing his spell. He had no need for the regalia's amplification, but he played along with the test. Let's see. Bullet speed, fastest. Additional operation, scattered bullets. Power level, boost large. Release limiter off. With a swift motion, Abel unleashed his spell. Fireball spread rain. A torrent of fireballs shot toward the target, faster and more powerful than anyone in the crowd had ever seen. The magic struck the setup with such force that the supposedly unbreakable target began to warp and melt. The crowd gasped. How is this possible? One of the examiners stammered. Amber eyes, performing such incredible magic. Ted, watching from the sidelines, beamed with pride. As expected of my teacher, he shouted, thrilled by Abel. The crowd, still in shock, began to whisper again. A genius magician, born once every 100 years, one of them exclaimed. He's no ordinary student, another. Abel paid no mind to the praise or the astonished looks. As far as he was concerned, this was just another routine display of magic. He had only used a fraction of his true abilities, but that was enough to shatter the long-held misconception about amber-eyed magicians. As he walked away from the testing ground, Abel allowed himself a small smile. At least I've corrected that misunderstanding, he thought. Maybe now the world will stop underestimating amber-eyed magicians. But as the crowd continued to buzz with excitement, Abel already knew that his performance had done more than just correct a misconception. It had cemented his status as a magician of unparalleled skill, even if no one yet knew the full extent of his power.